Breaking news, folks. We're doing breaking news on this show. This is a revolutionary program where the news breaks and then that's it. And then I tell you the news. Supreme Court curbs EPA's power to limit greenhouse gas emissions. So let me get this straight. So I want to remind everyone, like, the Supreme Court, they go to work every day wearing bed sheets and Snuggies that drag on the floor as they walk around. Ew, it's fucking filthy, right? And they just decree random shit is illegal. Like, that's their job. They made it up. It's not in the Constitution. Judicial review is not in the Constitution. They just made it up. So a couple, like, decades ago, right? I mean, maybe centuries ago, the Supreme Court was like, okay, we're just going to pretend that we have more power than we do. We're going to just declare random laws unconstitutional. We're going to declare random things unconstitutional, and then immediately it's unconstitutional. They have no army. They have no police force. How do they enforce this? Oh, because the rest of the government is just like, okay, all right, sounds good to me. Right? These motherfuckers are ridiculous. But the EPA, right? I don't know if you know this, the Environmental Protection Agency, right? What the goal of the EPA is, right? Congress basically abdicates its duty to the EPA, right? The Congress would pass a law that says we want clean air, and then the EPA is responsible for defining what clear air is, right? And so now the EPA has no power to define what clear air is. They have no power at all. The EPA is effectively abolished. I'm not sure if people still work there. I'm not sure if they're going to still get paychecks, but they basically have no power anymore. They're gone. It's over. Now, the Supreme Court signaled that this would be coming a couple of weeks ago when they ruled that the SEC had no power. The Securities and Exchange Commission, they had no power to enforce anything. So they're powerless, and now the EPA is powerless. And so anyone could bring any lawsuit for any other federal agency, the FDA. Right? Like, I don't know. I don't want those regulations in my pork products. I want extra feces in my hot dogs. That's coming down the pike, folks. I'm reading this on NBC News. Washington, the Supreme Court on Thursday curbed the Environmental Protection Agency's options for limiting greenhouse gas emissions from existing power plants, one of the most important environmental decisions in years, in a setback for the Biden administration's efforts to combat climate change. Isn't that great? The propaganda of mainstream news is like, yeah, Biden administrations, they have efforts to combat climate change. What? Where? When? How? But okay. The court said the EPA does not have the broad authority to shift the nation's energy production away from coal-burning power plants toward cleaner sources, including solar and wind. Future measures to address carbon dioxide pollution must be limited to restrictions imposed on specific coal-fired plants instead of pushing utilities to shift from coal toward renewable energies, it says. Folks, the world is literally burning to a crisp. Millions and millions of people are getting displaced. They're becoming climate refugees every year across the world. In the United States, one of, if not the, most important country in the world when it comes to industry, tied with China and Russia and India, right? The U.S. is doing nothing. So imagine, right, we're driving a car off a cliff, right? And this is what's happening. So what we need to do is go backwards. What we need to do is put the car into reverse and back the fuck up. Right? But the Supreme Court basically said, no, we're not going to back the fuck up. The Supreme Court also said, no, we're not going to slow down or stop. I mean, if we stopped and didn't drive off the cliff, that'd be pretty decent. Right? I would not want to live the rest of my days right next to the cliff. I'd like to get away from the cliff, right? But the Supreme Court's like, no, motherfucker, we're going to step on the gas. We're going in. And that's basically what's going on. We're fucked. And not in the good dick way, folks. The case came before the court in an unusual posture that challenges a group of red states and coal companies were not fighting any specific rule. Instead, they were contesting a federal appeals court decision that said the EPA could issue the kind of regulations they opposed. The legal battle began during the Obama administration when the EPA issued a plan for reducing carbon dioxide pollution from power plants by allowing their operators to get credit for generating more power from lower emitting sources. A coalition of states and coal companies sued, saying the Clean Air Act gave the government authority only to restrict pollution from specific power plants, not to require power companies to shift to different methods for generation. After the Supreme Court blocked the enforcement of that rule, the EPA abandoned it, and instead of the Trump administration proposed standards that would regulate only emissions from individual power plants that relaxed restrictions on greenhouse gases. Was then challenged by a different lineup of states and coalition of environmental groups. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia struck down the Trump administration's revised rule. As a result, no EPA restriction currently applies to carbon pollution from existing power plants, but the appeals court ruling left the door open for the Biden administration to resurrect the EPA's earlier approach, involving a shift to cleaner sources. That possibility is what coal companies in red states were asking the Supreme Court to prevent. The North American Coal Corp. Isn't it great that coal companies are deciding this stuff? Isn't that wonderful? Told the court that the EPA sought the power to effectively dictate not only the technical details of how a coal plant operates, but also the big picture policy and how the nation generates its electricity. But several large public utilities, including Pacific Gas and Electric Co. and Consolidated Edison, were on the Justice Department side. The ability for the EPA to regulate in this area is critical to power companies. They said for years power companies have used emissions. Can we talk about this, by the way? Why the fuck are power companies a thing? Like, what is that? Why doesn't the United States just nationalize energy production? Like, what is this garbage? Oh, the coal companies have to say? I don't give a shit what the fucking coal companies have to say. I don't fucking care. Do you care what the coal companies have to say? Do you care what Joe Manchin's fucking coal baron ass has to say? I don't give a fuck. But once again, folks, it's over. The administrative state doesn't exist anymore. Clean air? We never had it to begin with. But it's only going to get worse. Clean water? Look up water quality and look up your zip code. You'll see what the water quality is in your area. Right? This shit is fucked. We're fucked. We're fucked. We're fucked. And is Joe Biden going to do anything about it? Wah, wah.